The turban, the reason why it's permissible to wipe over it is because it's difficult to remove, sah? The same thing for the hijab. The hijab could be difficult to remove, so it's permissible to wipe.
العلم أشراف مطلوب وطالبه لله أكرام من يمشي على قدمه العلم نور مبين يستضيء به أهل السعادات والجهال في الظلم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أما بعد. طيب, does wiping over the socks happen if does wiping over the socks happen and is allowed? What's that? Does wiping over the socks is allowed? That's understandable.
And does the wiping on sock happen? And is it allowed only for the socks?
Yeah, you can. A person can wipe over level socks, the khuf, and normal socks that you've got on. It's authentically narrated from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he wiped over the khuf, and it's authentically narrated from some of the Sahaba that they wiped over the normal jawrab. Jawrab is called in Arabic, the socks. Jawrab. Oh, jawrabain if you're talking about its name too. Okay, the next title, conditions for wiping over the socks. The first one, putting them on while on full purification, having used wudu, having used water. So for example, if a person performs wudu, washes their feet as normal, then puts the socks on, that's the sort of situation they're allowed to wipe over the socks. طيب. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنِّي أَدْخَلْتُهُمَا طَاهِرَتَيْنِ, I put them on while being pure. Right. So putting them on while on full purification. Like in having used wudu. For example, I'll leave that example for now. Right. The second condition, keeping them on for the legislated period only. If it's 24 hours, 24 hours. Once the 24 hours finishes, then you may no longer wipe over the socks. Like in your wudu is still valid. The wudu is still valid, but what you may not do is wipe over the socks again. For example, if you wipe at 6 o'clock today, your time finishes 6 o'clock the next day, sah? Say you've got wudu at 5:45, 5:50. Up until 6 o'clock, you've got your wudu as normal. Then you take your socks off. You keep your socks on, like in the time finishes, it reaches 6 o'clock. After 6 o'clock, you may not wipe over the socks again, sah? Like, does your wudu become invalid? So the finishing of the time, it invalidates the wiping and not the actual wudu. طيب. The third,
You know the time period from the time from 12 to 12, where does that come from? With regard to the Sharia? يعني having the
يوم وليلة, hadith, يوم وليلة for a day and a night for the resident, and 3 days for the traveller. Day and a night, 24 hours, huh? 3 days, 72 hours. That's where it comes from. You're talking about this?
Yeah.
This is something else. This is when it starts.
Yeah, when the person who puts on his socks, he's got wudu, he puts on his socks at 12, and then he has until the next day 12 o'clock. So what happens if...
No. He doesn't have till the next day 12 o'clock. The time, the allocated time, the 24 hours or the 72 start from the first time he wipes after breaking your wudu. So wiping has to happen before your time starts.
So even if he's got wudu, and say he's got he's got wudu with his socks on, he breaks it with his socks on at 12 o'clock. midnight, for example.
Yeah.
You've got until the next day.
No, because the time doesn't start from the question you're asking is when does the time start, sir?
No.
The time starts the first time you break your wudu, the first time you wipe after having broken your wudu.
But if he breaks it at 12, he's got until the next day 12.
No, has he done any wiping? Has he wiped?
No.
No.
Just the first wipe.
So forget about the time that you put your socks on. Forget about the time you break your wudu.
No.
The criterion is the time that you wipe. طبعا after breaking your wudu.
And you've got that time until
The next day, same time.
to have that wudu.
To have that wudu. No, to have the wiping.
To have the wipe.
Because what we're talking about is the wiping. As for wudu, you can break 100 times within the 24 hours.
And so after that period, he's got to take off his socks and do wudu with his...
If he, nah. He's got to take off the socks and perform wudu. Like, if he happens to have wudu, when the time finishes, his wudu is still invalid. It's still valid. طيب, the third condition that the person can only wipe over the socks if they require wudu. Why is that? One, ghusl, if they require ghusl. And
Requires the whole body.
it requires for you to wash the whole body. So you need to take your socks off. So a person can only wipe the socks if they fall into minor impurity, such as going to the toilet, passing wind, eating camel's meat, and so on, or losing consciousness. And the hadith is the evidence, hadith of Anas radiallahu anhu, explained in, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained. طيب. Things which nullify the wiping of the socks. Things that nullify the wiping of the socks. Number one, the ending of the designated time. Has everyone understood the title? Put a line under wiping of the socks. Doesn't have the notes. To give him the notes, please.
The notes.
Are they finished?
There's no spares on the notes, is there? Yeah, they're finished. Do you want to share with that?
No, there is a spare one. Alright. Now there's a spare one.
But we send it electronically as well, so you can use the electronic one.
طيب. Things that nullify the wiping of the socks. This title is related to things that do not permit you to wipe over the socks. Like in your wudu can and will be valid. The first one is the ending of the time. The example we just mentioned now. Say your time finishes at 6 o'clock. But at 6 o'clock, you've got wudu. After 6 o'clock, you may not wipe over the socks, but your wudu is still valid. However long you keep your wudu. Is that understood? طيب. Number two, requiring or needing a ghusl, as we just mentioned, because with a ghusl you need to wash your whole body. Also, just to note that taking the socks off does not wipe or negate the wudu, or nullify the wudu. Huh? It nullifies the masnam, so you can't wipe over them. But your wudu is still valid. That was one of the questions last week as well. طيب. The next title, wiping over the turban or the hijab if necessary. Obviously, with regards to the turban, the Mughayr ibn Shu'bah narrates that the Prophet ﷺ wiped over his imama. The imama, not this one, the turban, that the Sudanis wear, or Jama'at Tabligh wear, the one that's hard to take off, and his forehead, and the khuf that we just studied. And also in the Musannaf of Abi Shaybah, Salama radiallahu anha wiped over her khimar. Wiping over the hijab and wiping over the imama. The imama has to be this one though, because these ones, it's easy to take off. Also the hats, easy to take off the hat. So a person can't wipe over the taqiyah or the hat. طبعا, it has been authentic that it is a necessity. With regards to the hijab, if a woman needs to wipe over her head due to having hijab on, due to an illness, she may wipe over her head. Or if it's difficult to remove. Because the turban, the reason why it's permissible to wipe over it is because it's difficult to remove, sah? The same thing for the hijab. The hijab could be difficult to remove, so it's permissible to wipe. Also, if there are men around, the woman can't take the hijab off if there are men around, so wiping over the hijab when there are men around as well. Also, if a woman puts on henna, some of the older women, they put on henna, and then they put a bag on top of it. In that case, they can also wipe over that as well. Henna.
Dye.
Dye.
Dye, sir.
Dye for the hair. Okay, 1 o'clock.
Yeah. They dye different colors so the grayness disappears.
Okay, for the sake of grayness.
But no, different reasons.
Okay,
But the grayness is one of
for
them.
beautification as well?
Hadi na'am. As long as it's not black.
As long as it's not black.
Not black. Not permissible to make it black. And if someone's got grey hair, puts black, there's trickery involved. The person appears to be younger. Except in jihad. Except in jihad. It was Abu Bakr's father, I believe, that Prophet ﷺ allowed him to do so in order to look younger. I believe it was a hadith of that sort of content. As for the statement of Ibn Taymiyyah, I didn't translate it, someone else translated it. Like, and I copied it from them. Like, in the translation is not wadih, it's not clear. I tried to go back to the Arabic version, I couldn't find the Arabic version. I downloaded the kitab, like, and I couldn't find the specific part. Like, all the Shaykh is saying, you'll notice, and that's the one I was telling you to take out, you'll notice that it's not clear what the way they translated it is not quite clear. But what he's saying is, because it's permissible for the man to wipe over his turban due to the difficulty that he may face, likewise the hijab. Meaning the hijab is difficult to take off, so qiyas, using qiyas analogy then, is also not permissible. It's also permissible to wipe over the hijab. طيب. Let's move on to the 5th condition. Start reading.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد، قال المؤلف رحمه الله: الشرط الخامس إزالة النجاسة من 3: من البدن والثوب والبقعة، والدليل قوله تعالى: وثيابك فطهر.
The Shaykh rahmatullah alayhi starts the 5th condition. The 5th condition of what? The 5th condition from the conditions of as-Salaah. The 4th condition, he went in depth. He talked about the conditions of the wudu. The 4th condition was wudu. He talked about the conditions of wudu, things that nullify wudu, things, or the wajibat, or the obligations of wudu. So, half of last lesson and the beginning of this lesson was related to that. The 5th condition, the Shaykh says, izalatu najasa, which means removing filth. This requires removing it from 3 things. From one's body, one's garments, and from the area that he is praying in. And the Shaykh used as evidence the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ, in Surah Al-Mudaththir, and purify your garments. طيب. This is referring to cleanliness, cleaning oneself. And the 4th condition was what? Wudu. What's the difference between the 2? Or is it a repetition? What's the difference? Okay, somewhat the intention now.
One is spiritual and the other one is physical cleanliness.
Which one's the spiritual?
The wudu is the spiritual one. Because you may not have actual najasa on you, but it's
But you're doing it physically.
But the other one is physical najasa on you. You're actually removing najasa. So the wudu is you may not. You might have just had a shower.
Wudu, you can still be removing najasa,
You might have had a shower. If you had a shower or bath and just come out, you're still required.
If someone goes to the toilet, they're removing najasa,
You've got some sort of steps to take. Or removing najasa, you don't need to actually take certain steps. Like you
do.
Things. You remove your janazah, you can just put your clothes in the wash machine and do your job.
Sorry.
2 differences, right? The fourth condition is related to the ritual impurity, as the brother said. Meaning, it's to do with the human body, the body itself. Performing wudu, yani you wash the limbs. Lakin, this condition is related to the actual human body. The first one, the fourth one, is relating to a spiritual one where you can't see the najasa. Yani, now there's probably 15 of you here from the brothers. Can we tell the one that's on wudu and the one that isn't on wudu? La. So the fourth condition deals with that. Now the fifth condition, it deals with if there is any filth on your body, or on your thobe, or on the place that you're praying. Now this najasa, can we not see it? If there's najasa on the floor, we can see it. Another difference, it's all on the notes as well, is that for making wudu, for the fourth condition, for making wudu, you need to have the intention. You need to have an intention to remove the impurity, the spiritual impurity. And when you're making wudu, you need to have the correct intention, meaning that you intend to perform wudu. As for this condition, the fifth condition, which is removing filth, you don't have to have intention. You don't have to have an intention for removing it. For example, if there's urine on your thobe, and then you hang it out to dry on the balcony, or you leave it out in the balcony, and it rains, and the rain cleans the urine from your thobe, have you intended? Is your thobe clean? Is someone going to say to you, you have to put the urine back on your thobe and intend to remove the najasa? La. So you don't have to have the intention. Likewise, in the authentic hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ was asked about the hijab of the woman being long, so obviously it attracts najasa, then the Prophet ﷺ said that which comes after it purifies it. So likewise, you don't have to have intention. So that's the difference between raf al-hadath, or performing wudu, or ghusl, and izalat al-najasa, removing filth from, or impurities from the body, place of prayer, or the clothes. The Shaykh mentions three things. There are three different evidences for each one, or there's an evidence for each one. As for removing it from the body, the evidence are many. But from them, the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith of Ibn Abbas, in which the Messenger ﷺ walked by a grave, or two graves, and then he wet some sort of branch, and then he put it next to these two graves, so that the punishment can be خُفِّفَ عَلَيْهِمْ, it can be lessened while it's wet. Then the companions asked the Messenger ﷺ, and he said, as for one of them, he used to go around with namima, causing problems between people. As for one of them, the other one, he never used to purify himself from urine. He never used to purify himself from urine. So that shows that a person must purify himself from any sort of najasa that touches his body or her body. That's the evidence for the body. Removing najasa from the body. The evidence is the hadith of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, in which the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam walked past two graves. As for the hadith, or as for removing najasa from the clothes, again the hadiths are many, lakin from them, the hadith of Asma bint Abi Bakr radiallahu anhuma, in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked, how should we purify the clothes from the menses blood? So the Prophet ﷺ said, اغسلي عنك الدم وصلي. Wipe the garment, wash the garment, and then pray. Wash the garment, the hijab, or the khimar, the hijab, and then perform the salah. So that's the evidence for wiping over the clothes. As for the place of prayer, the hadith of the Arabi, the Bedouin that came into the masjid, the hadith of Anas, muttafaq alayhi, in Bukhari and Muslim, in which the Bedouin came and urinated in the masjid. And then the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's a long hadith, the companions were angry. They wanted to harm this individual. And then the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam told them to leave him alone until he finishes. Then the man finished. Then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked for a bowl of water and then poured water over the najasa, over the urine. So the point of evidence is that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded for the spot to be purified, for the place where the urine had touched. طيب. The hadith obviously is in Bukhari and Muslim. So these three, the clothes, the body, and the place of prayer, a person has to wipe over or clean them. There's a benefit to do with al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy 'anil munkar in this hadith. Does anyone know what it is? A benefit to do with commanding the good and prohibiting or preventing the evil. And the hadith of the man that urinated in the masjid. صح. That's where this is a condition that the scholars take from when enjoining the good, al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy 'anil munkar, when enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, that if you intend to prevent or prohibit or stop a certain munkar or evil or sin happening, then the change that you bring about must not bring greater harm and evil than that evil itself, than the original evil. Because the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to them, leave him alone. No doubt that this Bedouin urine in the masjid is making the masjid dirty, sah? طيب. The masjid is going to be najis, or certain part of the masjid will be najis. Lakin, if the Prophet ﷺ did not prevent the companions from harming this individual, had that have happened, then he would have urinated on them or on other parts of the masjid. Whereas when he continued, the Prophet only poured water over a certain part. Like if he was attacked, then the urine would have gone everywhere. Also, it may have caused him harm, because if he stops, then the urine going back into the body might cause him harm as well. So in general, whenever you want to enjoin good or forbid the evil, you have to make sure that what you're changing, or the thing that you're bringing, you're changing it to, isn't greater than the harm that is already taking place. A simple example is Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi. One time he was with Ibn Qayyim rahmatullahi alayhi. And Ibn Qayyim is the student of Ibn Taymiyyah. And they walked past the Tatar. And they were drunk on the floor, asleep. Then Ibn Qayyim rahmatullahi alayhi said to Ibn Taymiyyah, should we not tell them to stop drinking? Then Ibn Taymiyyah said to him, La, let them drink. Because if they become sober, they're going to start killing the Muslims. If they become sober, because they're vicious people, they're going to start killing the Muslims. Which is greater, a person being drunk, lying down on the floor, out of the people's way, or him being sober and killing them? Which one's greater? Killing the Muslim, طبعا. Killing the people is greater. طيب. What happens if a person, after finishing his prayer, finds najasa on his thawb or his hijab, or her hijab? Meaning, should we tell them to repeat the salah, or should we tell them to not repeat the salah? And a person is in salah, finished. Yani Salat al-Maghrib alan, we finished. Someone realizes that he had najasa on his thawb. And then he says, what can I do? He asks you for a fatwa. You said no, huh? Oh, I said Allahu alam, طيب. Huh? Do not repeat the salah. He doesn't have to repeat the salah. Does anyone disagree with him?
Another opinion on that if there's time within the time frame for him to repeat the salah, then he should. But also there's the opinion that he done what was necessary. He didn't know that it was there, so his intention was so his prayers correct.
طيب جيد ما شاء الله. You said he doesn't have to repeat it, sir. Why is that?
Because he didn't know the impurity was done, and also when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he had an impurity on during Salah, Jibreel alayhi salam told him to remove it during Salah.
صح.
And after the Salah, he didn't make up that part of the prayer.
أحسنت ما شاء الله. طيب, if a person remembers or sees that they have some sort of najasa on their hijab, on the place of prayer, the mat that they prayed on, or on their body, and they realize after the salah, they do not need to repeat it. The evidence is the hadith that the Prophet just mentioned, and it's in the notes, where Jibreel came to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam took his shoes off, yani his sandals off. The companions done the same. So when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam finished the salah, he said, "Ma balakum, yani, how come you don't have your sandals on?" Then they said that we've seen you take your shoes off, socks off, sandals off, which shows how the companions ridwanullahi alayhim used to copy the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then he explained that Jibreel came to him and he informed him that there was najasa on his sandals, so he took it off sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The point of evidence, or wajhu dalala, is, remember we mentioned last week that when you're using every type of evidence, you have to have two. Ad-dalil wa wajhu dalala. The dalil itself, the evidence, you have to mention it, and wajhu dalala, the way or the point of evidence. The point of evidence is the salah that the Prophet ﷺ prayed beforehand, before taking the shoes off, he did not repeat it. Rather, he carried on the salah, and then he completed his salah as normal. Like, he did not repeat it. So if it was wajib to repeat the salah, then the Prophet ﷺ would have made up the raka'at, the units of prayer he prayed beforehand. طيب, what about if a person realizes during salah? During salah, he's in the salah and he realizes there's najasa on him. If he's able. And if he's not, does he stop the prayer, leave the salah, and then remove it, huh? Huh? He stops the salah.
Depends, as long as it's not going to nullify salah, yani it's not going to make him go into a ruku or some sort of other position.
Yeah.
If the najasa is on his toe, مثلا, and underneath he's wearing something that's not appropriate, maybe he's going to show the aura,
طيب.
then he has to stop the salah, and then take it off and maybe put something on it.
Okay. So the first that you've all agreed on is that if he's able to take it off, then he should do so. If there's najasa on there, you just take it off. صح? Or the taqiyya, your hat, or a scarf that you're wearing, or a jacket, you can easily take it off. Like if it's your t-shirt, for example, if you're praying in tracksuit bottoms and a t-shirt, if it's your t-shirt, you realize that the najasa is on. If you try taking it off, you're going to show your awra, sah? Likewise, your thobe you can get away with because you might have appropriate clothes underneath. In that case, you should continue your salah. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها فاتقوا الله ما استطعتم. That is a qaida, that is a principle in fiqh. فاتقوا الله ما استطعتم. It's a principle, it's a verse in the Quran, but it's also a principle. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the best of your ability.
So he takes it off if he found the najasa.
If he's able to take it off without showing any of his awra, then they take it off. If not, they continue their salah with the najasa on. But what if a person realizes after the salah that they didn't have wudu? Huh? Does everyone agree with Abdul Qadir? He has to repeat the salah again. Okay. So why do we say that the person that left out wudu prayed without wudu has to repeat the salah. But the person that prayed with najasa doesn't have to repeat the salah.
Because the wudu requires intention. The wudu is wajib. He has to do it before the salah. It's the condition of... no.
Condition of salah. طيب. A condition of salah is removing impurities. صح? This is what fiqh is. Fiqh in general, like for example, when the scholars are talking about fiqh, it's just removing, using your dhihn, using your mind. That's what fiqh is. A lot of the issues that you find in the books of fiqh, Zad al-Mustaqni', and all of these books, you think, how did they come out of these things, the scholars? Like, and that's all fiqh is, niqash. Go on.
I thought I was going to say because there's a nas, because the Rasul ﷺ didn't repeat, didn't nullify Salah, so we have a nas basically.
Fair enough. The difference is, because if a person is commanded to do a specific act, they must do the act how it was commanded. You're commanded to perform the prayer. You have to perform the prayer. You've been commanded to do something. Whereas if you've been commanded to leave something, if you fall into it, then qaddarullahu ma sha fa'al, it's done. It's something which you've left out. Like you won't be held to account for it. For example, Salat al-Isha. It's wajib upon you to pray, sah? If you leave it out and you don't pray Isha. That responsibility or that wajib is still upon your shoulders. So you have to what? Pray. There's no expiation or there's no way you can get rid of it. You have to pray it. Like if you've been commanded to stay away from something, like you've been commanded to stay away from the najasa when you want to pray, sah? Or a person's been commanded to stay away from alcohol, sah? It's a prohibition. If you fall into the prohibition, then there's no requirement for you obviously to do it again. It's something which is done. So removing the impurity is something you was meant to leave out. Like, and if you accidentally do so, then obviously it's not something that you have to, or you can repeat. Whereas something which is wajib, you have to repeat. So there's a difference between something you've been commanded to do and something that you've been commanded to stay away from. Inshallah, we'll see it further in Manhaj as-Salikin. The next one, the next condition. That's the end of that condition. The next condition, 6. What condition was that? Yani? Nullifying the socks, we passed that zaman. Izalat al-najasa, removing impurities. Number 5.
الشرط السادس ستر العورة. أجمع أهل العلم على فساد الصلاة من صلى عريانا وهو يقدر. وحد عورة الرجل من السرة إلى الركبة والأمة كذلك والحرة كلها عورة إلا وجهها. والدليل قوله تعالى يا بني آدم خذوا زينتكم عند كل مسجد أي عند كل الصلاة.
طيب, this condition, the Shaykh said, covering the awrah. The people of knowledge have unanimously agreed that the prayer of one who prays naked while having the ability to clothe oneself is invalid. The boundaries of the awrah. Then he starts the boundaries of the awrah. What is the awrah of the man? What is the awrah of the woman? The boundaries of the awrah for the man are from the navel to his knees. And the same applies to the female slave. As for a free woman, all of her body is awrah except the face. And the evidence that the Shaykh used is the proof of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the statements of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. O Bani Adam, Ya Bani Adam, khudhu zinatakum inda kulli masjid. O Bani Adam, take your adornment by covering yourselves with clean clothes when praying. طيب. Usually the fuqaha, when they're talking about this, they say satr al-awrah, covering the awrah. Does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talk about covering the awrah in the verse? Huh? What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? Zina, which is what? Adornment. Yani beautifying yourself for the salah. Beautifying yourself, taking your adornment, is a higher status than covering your awrah. خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ, yani taking your adornment means that you wear beautiful clothes and you're in a beautiful state, and then you start your salah. As for covering the awrah, it's the bare necessity. It's the bare necessity, the minimum. Meaning that you have to cover the awrah that the Shaykh is that we're gonna look into in a second. And that's normal in the books of fiqh. The scholars, they usually talk about the bare necessity. For example, some of the strange examples that you might see, or things that you might come across, we've got until 6:30. In Kitab al-Nikah, when they're talking about the rights of the wife over the man, from them is that he clothes her, sah? Yeah? From the things that they mention, the season, he buys her a coat, shoes, and something minor, something like to those lines, along those lines. And then in the summer season, he does the same. And that is a bare necessity. Like when the fuqaha, the scholars of fiqh, when they're talking about the basic thing which is wajib, whereby if anyone falls underneath that line, they fall into sin. Obviously, people do more than that, and that's the basic necessity. Likewise, taking the awrah, covering your awrah is the basic necessity. ما في مشكلة. We'll come to that, such as what people do when they wear trousers, the awrah appears. We'll see that على كل حال. Like in taking your adornment, meaning that you beautify yourself. طيب. And the evidence is the verse that we've just seen. Also, what is required from the Muslim who wants to complete his ibadah and attain the full reward is that they beautify themselves when they want to pray the salah. Not to pray in their pajamas, or not to pray in clothes that they wouldn't like people to see them in. Because when you're praying the salah, you're standing in front of Rabbul Alameen. You're standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who is more worthy that you beautify yourself for? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the Shaykh moves on to the awrah. He mentions the awrah of the man and the awrah of the woman. The awrah of the man, as the Shaykh rahmatullahi alayhi mentions, is from the navel to the knees. Now a person covers from the navel, from the belly button to up to the knees. Also in an authentic hadith it's been narrated that the Prophet ﷺ commanded the men to cover their shoulders. To cover the shoulders. Now the scholars, or Jumhur al-Ulama, most of the scholars, they say that even if a person doesn't cover the two shoulders, the man, then his salah is still accepted. Like it's mustahab to cover the awrah. Going back to the hadith, it's an authentic hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, none of you should pray in a single garment with no part of his shoulders covered. Questions after, write them down here. So write them down so you don't forget. طيب. So the awrah of the man is from the belly button, or the navel, to and including the knees, just underneath the knees. What happens is sometimes when brothers are praying, if they've got trousers on, when they perform sujood, their shirt lifts up, goes up, and the back of their back is, you can see their back. That's something brothers should be aware of. And tuck it in, that's the safer bet, that you tuck it in before the salah. If it does happen during the salah, there's no problem, let them cover it up straight away. طيب. As for the awrah of the woman, it's the whole body except the face and the hands. The face and the hands. Also, if some of the feet or if her feet show during the salah, yani the bottom part of the feet show while she's in sujood, then it doesn't matter. Lakin the wajib upon the women is that they cover the whole body, excluding the face and the hands. And as you can see, the scholars there's a consensus, an ijma' from the scholars that the woman cannot cover her prayer, or cover her face during the prayer, or in ihram, when a person goes to or performs hajj. Lakin, if there are men around, then she may cover her face. Then she may, or she should, depending on which opinion a person takes, then she should or has to cover the face.
Hassan, in this regarding Salah, what should we do?
The salah. Jazakallah khair. There's two awras. There's two awras. There's awra to nadar, the awra of seeing, and there's an awra which is specific to the salah. What we're talking about now is the awra which is specific to the salah. As for outside of the salah, then the woman should cover her face and her hands, on one opinion, or her hands on the other opinion. Yani whether her hands are awra or not, that's outside of the salah, that there's a difference of opinion amongst the scholars. Like inside the salah, it's wajib that she shows her face, she doesn't cover her face, طبعا if there are non-maharim around. طيب, next one.
Next one.
Number 7.
الشرط السابع دخول الوقت، والدليل من السنة حديث جبريل عليه السلام أنه أما النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في أول الوقت وفي آخره فقال يا محمد الصلاة بين هذين الوقتين. وقوله تعالى إن الصلاة كانت على المؤمنين كتابا موقوتا، أي مفروضا في الأوقات. والدليل الأوقات قوله تعالى أقم الصلاة لدلوك الشمس إلى غسق الليل وقرآن الفجر إن قرآن الفجر كان مشهودا.
طيب, this condition is the seventh condition for the salah. It's the entrance of the time. The translation being what the Prophet just read, the entrance of the proper time of the salah. طبعا. The proof from this is the sunnah, from that sunnah of the hadith of Jibreel, in which he led the Prophet ﷺ in one prayer during the initial times, yani the first time, and during the last of the hour of it, yani the end of it. And then he said to the Messenger ﷺ, O Muhammad, the prayer is between these two. Meaning Jibreel came to the Prophet ﷺ on two separate occasions. So the first occasion was that he came at the beginning of the salah and he prayed. The beginning of the time, and then he prayed with the Prophet ﷺ. On the next day he came at the end of the time, just before it ends, and then he said to the Messenger ﷺ, O Muhammad, the time of the salah is in between these two. Meaning the time that we prayed in yesterday and the time that we prayed in today. And also the Shaykh mentions the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, verily the prayer is enjoined on the believers at fixed hours. And also the verse in Surah Isra where Allah Jalla wa Ala says, establish the prayer from midday till darkness, the four prayers, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib and Isha, and recite the Quran in the early dawn, meaning Fajr. Verily the recitation of the Quran in the early dawn is ever witnessed by the angels. This is the most important condition with regards to the conditions of the salah. It's the most important condition. The other conditions can be waived or left out in order to accommodate the time of the salah. For example, if a person sees that the time of salah is just about to finish, Maghrib for example, or the time of Asr for example, the sun is just about to set, the time of Asr is almost finished, and he finds he has no clothes, nothing to cover his awrah up, nothing to cover his awrah with, it is wajib upon them to pray naked, even without covering their awrah. If a person can cover their awrah but doesn't find water, can't find water to perform wudu, he can't find wudu, and he can't perform tayammum, he should pray how he is. And if a person is on janaba, for example, if a person is on janaba and he can't find wudu, and the time of the salah is finishing, he needs to pray even without performing ghusl. It's called faqidu tuhurain. If he can't find tayammum, if he can't find water to perform wudu in, he should still pray. Likewise, if a person doesn't know where the qibla is, like we'll see the next condition, if a person doesn't know where the qibla is and the time is just about to finish, they should still pray towards the qibla or the direction that they feel is the closest to the qibla. So the entrance of the time is the most important condition within the salah, from the conditions of salah. So it's wajib that obviously a person preserves the timings of the salah. Also, there's a consensus, an ijma' from the scholars, or between the scholars, that a person cannot pray any salah before its time. A consensus, an ijma', meaning you won't find any sort of khilaf. That you can, the scholars have ijma' that you cannot pray the salah before its time. For example, if you're about to travel and the time of dhuhr is about half an hour left, you can't say because I'm going to be traveling and it's going to be difficult for me to pray on the plane, I'm just going to pray now, even though it's half an hour before the salah. Likewise, if a person finds himself awake at 3 o'clock in the morning and Fajr is at 4:15 or starts at 4:15, he can't say, if I sleep, I know I'm not going to wake up for Salatul Fajr, therefore I'm going to pray now. And ijma' that a person cannot do that. As for the finishing of the time of the salah, the ending of the time, then there's also an ijma' that a person cannot leave the salah until it passes its time, except without having a legitimate excuse or legitimate reason. So if it's, for example, if dhuhr finishes at 2 o'clock, you need to pray before 2 o'clock. You cannot delay it to 2:15, 2:30 and so on. Unless you have a legitimate excuse, such as Salatul Khawf, Hal al-Jihad, in Jihad for example. Or if a person is traveling and they know they're going to pray Dhuhr and Asr together at the time of Asr. Because with Jam', when you're combining prayers, you can either pray both Salah at the time of the first Salah, meaning you can pray Dhuhr and Asr at the time of Asr, which is called Jam' Taqdeem, that you pray both at that time. Or you can do Jam' Ta'khir, which means you pray Dhuhr and Asr at the time of, Asr, meaning you put it back. طيب. Also with regards to the time, if a person misses several different salawat, for example, they were on, or they totally forgot, a person was so busy that they forgot to pray Dhuhr and they forgot to pray Asr. And then obviously the time of Asr is about to finish. They should pray in tartib, meaning they should pray in order. Likewise, if a person forgot to pray Dhuhr, then Asr, and now it's the time of Maghrib, they should pray Dhuhr first, Asr next, and then Salatul Maghrib, meaning they should pray in order, except in one instance. That being, can anyone guess?
If they for example, you mentioned Maghrib time. If they think that Maghrib time is finished, they
Ahsant.
pray all the prayers, then
Yeah.
after Maghrib, and then they pray the whole.
Ahsant. Jazakallah khair. For example, if a person missed the Dhuhr prayer, and right now they're about to pray the Asr prayer, like in the time of the Asr is about to finish, and there's literally only enough for him to perform wudu and pray 4 units of prayer, 4 rak'at. Is it better for him to pray in order, meaning pray Dhuhr first and then Asr, bearing in mind that he's going to have to pray Asr outside of its time? Or is it better for him to pray Asr first, within its time, and then go back for Dhuhr? Which one's better? Pray Asr first and then go back for Dhuhr. Why is that? Ahsant. If he prays Dhuhr first, then that means Asr is also going to be out of its time. Like if he prays Asr first, he's only going to be dealing with 1 Salah that he missed. Whereas if he prays Dhuhr first and delays Asr, he's going to be dealing with 2 Salawat that he missed. طيب. Also, what happens sometimes is, if a person is traveling, he's allowed to what? Combine the Salah, sah? When is it allowed for him to start to combine the Salah? For example, a person lives in East London, and he's flying out from Heathrow Airport. Now, to get to Heathrow Airport, it takes about an hour, from Newham, it takes about an hour and 15 to 20 minutes. When he gets to the airport, can he combine both Salahs, Dhuhr and Asr, for example, if his flight is at 1 o'clock, meaning after the time of Salah, Salatul Dhuhr, can he pray Dhuhr and Asr in the airport? Huh? Naam? Put your hand up if you think he can pray these 2 Salahs in the airport.
Before the Salah kicked in?
La, Salahs is the time of Dhuhr has come in. Yani Salatul Dhuhr starts at 12 o'clock and it finishes at 2 o'clock. His flight is at 1 o'clock, well within the time of Salatul Dhuhr. But we know when a person is traveling, he can combine 2 prayers, sah? So when he's at the airport, can he combine Dhuhr and Asr, and can he shorten the prayer? No, why not?
Because he still takes the ruling of Aristan,
But he's travelled all the way from Newham.
but he's still in the city of London.
He hasn't traveled. The plane hasn't gone off.
Naam. Allah says, وَإِذَا ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ, if you hit the earth, or if you move around the earth, that time you haven't moved. Yani if you're in the airport, your journey hasn't started. Like, and that's a common mistake that a lot of people do. Huh? He already started his safar. But when does the safar start? Does the safar start when he leaves his house, or when he actually leaves the city? Yani he gets up on the plane. The scholars mention that the safar starts when you actually leave your city. Because from here to Heathrow Airport, are you travelling? You are considered a traveller. La. From here to Heathrow, you're not considered a traveller. It's what's beyond the airport that renders or considers you to be a traveller. Like, be aware, because a lot of people make a mistake where they shorten the prayer in the airport, and a lot of them will debate with you and say, I'm travelling, I've got my bags and I've got my passport and I'm travelling. طيب.
You know, if you travel from here to like a place like Essex, just outside London, from East London, are you still considered a traveller even though that distance is shorter than from here to
If you're travelling from here to Essex,
Essex, yeah. Or outside, yes, from that distance. So you left the city, but the distance is still shorter than if you
صح.
were to go to East London.
Yeah, it's not. If you're going to a distance which is like 48 miles, or which is considered travelling, if you leave the city, you're outside London, then you can start your the shortening of the prayer, so on. If you start your journey and you're outside the boundaries of London.
So it's linked to, it's not about distance, it's about
Where you are, na'am. Firaq al-Bunyan they call it, that you're away from the city. طيب. طيب, yeah, please say that, yeah, because it's quite...
Questions after, inshallah, please.
Write them
I
down.
want to try and get as far as we can.
At least finish the conditioners today. طيب. There's also a very important issue, and it's in bold, which is related to the time. If a woman's menses ends during the time of Asr, she should also pray Dhuhr. Likewise, if it ends during the time of Isha, she should also pray Maghrib. This is the opinion of three companions: Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiyallahu anhu, Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu, and Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, wa radiyallahu anhum ajma'in. The reason is because these two prayers are combined when traveling, or when it's raining, or when a person has a legitimate excuse. So likewise for the menstruating woman. That's quite important. Meaning, say the time of Asr is from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and the sun sets at 5 o'clock, meaning Maghrib starts at 5 o'clock. If a woman becomes pure, not if a woman becomes pure, because the woman is always pure. Lakin if the menses ends, or the postnatal bleeding ends at the time of Asr, meaning any time between 3 and 5, she needs to, obviously after making ghusl, perform dhuhr first, and then perform Asr. Is that understood? No? I think the sisters probably understand. طيب. And Dhuhr starts at 2 to 3. 12 to 3, طيب. That's the time of Dhuhr, 12 to 3. And it's Dhuhr time. And the woman's on her menses. Does she have to pray Dhuhr? Why? She's on her menses. طيب. 3 o'clock is the time of Asr, starts at 3 o'clock, and it finishes at 5 o'clock. So any time within the time of Asr, 4 o'clock let's say, her menses ends. It's wajib upon her to make a ghusl, take a ghusl, and then pray Asr, sah? It's wajib. Why? Because it's the time of Salah and she's able to pray. The excuse is lifted, meaning the menses finished. طيب. The question is, what about Salatul Dhuhr, which ended at 3 o'clock? It's not wajib, huh? Why is that? You've understood the masala now, have you understood it, yeah? Likewise for Maghrib. For example, if during the time of Maghrib, if the sister was on her menses, and then at the time of Isha, in the winter nights, for example, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, which is the time of Isha, well into the time of Isha, she ends her menses. Does she have to pray Salat al-Maghrib or not? La, she's not traveling resident. La? Why not? Put your hand up if you think she has to, she doesn't have to repeat that Salah that's gone. طيب. Why is that? What makes you think she doesn't have to repeat it?
It's out of control. The Salah that had finished, that she missed already, she wasn't able to pray because of the menses. She had it finished, and had her menses finished, and she would have been able to pray. He said the Qawa'id of Fatahullah and Fatah.
صح. So at that time, because it wasn't wajib upon her at that time, طيب.
Also the fact that she had the excuse of being because she was in her menses, it wasn't obligatory from her. And there's a hadith I think was mentioned that Allah likes the rukhsah to be taken.
Her not praying is not a rukhsah, it's not wajib. Aslan, she can't pray. It's not a rukhsah that she's taken. Not praying is not a rukhsah. It's haram for her to pray. So it's not a rukhsah that's been taken. Muhammad.
It's outside of the time. And plus at the time, in that time, she took the ruling of the person who's high.
صح.
So therefore, it was dropped from her rulings.
طيب. That's the khilaf that's present amongst the fuqaha. I'm not saying it was out of her control. Lakin, what do we do with the free fatwa and the opinions of the companions? Ya akhwan, the opinions of the companions have weight. They were there when the revelation was being revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So their weight or their opinion carries a lot of weight.